My sister stole my money, so my mom tried to ship me to military school, but I got the last laugh. Hello, read it. People always say that family is supposed to have your back no matter what. That no matter how much the world turns against you, your own blood will be there to lift you up, to keep you safe. I used to believe that. I used to think that, even when things got bad, even when life threw the worst at me, at least I had my family. I don't believe that anymore. My name is Nathan, and I'm 17 years old. In just a few months, I was supposed to be free. High school would be over, college would begin, and I would finally be able to escape the house that had never really felt like home. I had spent my whole life waiting for that moment. But the thing about waiting for something so desperately is that you don't see it when the ground starts cracking beneath your feet. You don't notice that freedom isn't guaranteed. And before I even realized what was happening, everything I had built, everything I had worked for was taken from me. I was born into a family that always made me feel like I was just a supporting character in someone else's story. My mom, Helen, was the type of person who only saw the world the way she wanted to see it. She believed in favorites, and in her mind, my older sister Ashley was the only one worth putting on a pedestal. Ashley was perfect. At least that's what my mother always told me. The golden child, the one who could do no wrong. She was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to understand anything, I knew that she was the priority. If she wanted something, she got it. If she messed up, someone else took the fall. If she broke the rules simply didn't matter anymore. I wasn't jealous of her. I was tired of her. While she coasted through life without a care, I had to fight for everything. My mother never handed me anything, not money, not attention, not even basic acknowledgement most of the time. If I wanted something, I had to work for it. If I needed help, I had to figure it out myself. And so I did. By the time I was 15, I had already started taking any job I could get. I mowed lawns, walked dogs, did grocery runs for old neighbors. At 16, I got my first real job at a fast food place and worked every shift I could manage while still keeping my grades up. I saved every dollar, knowing that if I wanted to escape, I had to do it alone. I didn't mind the work. What I did mind was watching Ashley waste every opportunity that was handed to her while my mother made excuse after excuse for her. She was reckless. She made stupid choices. She spent money like it meant nothing, crashed cars she didn't pay for, racked up bills that she expected someone else to handle. And my mother let her. She defended her. She told me I needed to be more understanding, that Ashley was just finding herself. That's what she said when Ashley dropped out of college after one semester. That's what she said when Ashley got fired from 3 different jobs in less than a year. That's what she said every single time Ashley screwed up. And every time I bit my tongue, I kept my head down. I worked. I saved. Because I had a plan. I wasn't going to end up like her. I wasn't going to be another disappointment, another burden, another person who expected the world to save them when things got hard. I was going to be better. So I kept pushing forward. While Ashley partied, I studied. While she made excuses, I made progress. And by the time I was 17, I had saved over $15,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. Enough for a solid start, college tuition, an apartment, a life that I could finally call my own. But the thing about people like Ashley, they don't just ruin their own lives. They take everyone else down with them. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of an unexpected attitude shift. Ashley, who usually ignored my existence unless she needed something, was suddenly too nice. She started showing interest in my life, asking about school, about my plans. She made casual comments about how she wished she had been as responsible as me, how lucky I was to have saved up so much money. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that Ashley only acted like that when she wanted something. Then little things started disappearing. At first, it was just spare cash. I always kept a little bit of money in my room, nothing major, just pocket change from my shifts. But it was going missing. $10 here, $20 there. I noticed, but I didn't say anything at first. Maybe I had miscounted. Maybe I had spent more than I thought. Then, one day, my wallet was gone. Not just the money inside it, the whole thing. I searched the house, tore apart my room, but it was nowhere. I asked my mom if she had seen it, and she just waved me off, saying I probably left it somewhere. I knew I hadn't. I started locking my bedroom door after that. Not because I thought my own sister would steal from me, but because I wasn't willing to take that risk. It didn't matter, because she didn't need to steal cash from my room. She had access to my bank account. That's what I didn't realize until it was too late. Ashley had stolen my debit card. She had memorized my PIN, and over the course of one single night, she had drained every dollar from my savings account. $15,000. Gone. When I logged in and saw that my balance was sitting at zero, I felt my entire body go numb. At first, I thought there had been a mistake, that maybe the bank had messed up. But then I checked the transaction history. Transfers. Withdrawals. All under her name. Ashley. My own sister had robbed me. Everything I had worked for, everything I had saved, everything I had spent years building, she had taken it all in a single night. And when I confronted her, when I demanded answers, when I stood there shaking with rage, she didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She laughed. And my mother? She told me to calm down. She told me I was overreacting. She told me that Ashley needed the money, and that as her brother, I should be willing to help her out. I had spent years trying to prove myself, trying to be the responsible one, the reliable one, the good son, and in one single moment, I realized the truth. It didn't matter how hard I worked. It didn't matter what I did, because in my mother's eyes, Ashley would always come first. And I was nothing more than an afterthought. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was still coming, because my mother wasn't just going to defend her. She was about to do something far worse. She was about to get rid of me for good. I had always known my mother favored Ashley. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was something I had lived with for as long as I could remember. Ashley was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my mother adored. It didn't matter that she was reckless, that she spent money she didn't have, that she made one bad decision after another. None of it ever stuck to her. No matter what Ashley did, my mother was always there to defend her, to clean up after her messes, to make sure she never had to face the consequences of her actions. I had learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to earn it myself. There were no handouts for me, no special treatment, no easy way out. I had spent my teenage years working whatever jobs I could find, saving every dollar, planning for the day when I could finally leave this place behind. It was the only thing that kept me going, the knowledge that I was working towards something, that my effort actually meant something. But all of that had been wiped away in a single night. When I first saw my bank account sitting at zero, I had felt nothing at all. It was like my brain refused to process what was happening, like the numbers in front of me didn't make sense. I had refreshed the page, thinking there had to be some kind of mistake. Then I checked the transaction history, and reality came crashing down on me. Ashley had stolen it. $15,000, years of work gone. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the fact that Ashley didn't care. She hadn't even tried to justify it. When I confronted her, she had just smirked, shrugged, and told me it was gone. She had spent it. I didn't even know on what. And when I had turned to my mother, expecting at least some kind of outrage, some kind of acknowledgement that this was wrong, she had only shaken her head and told me to let it go. I had spent my whole life trying to prove myself, trying to be the responsible one, the reliable one, the good son, and in one single moment, I realized the truth. It didn't matter. My mother wasn't just going to let Ashley get away with it. She was going to stand by her, defend her, act like I was the unreasonable one for being angry. I stopped talking to them after that. I barely left my room, barely ate, barely slept. It wasn't just that I was angry, I was numb, empty, like something had been ripped out of me, and all that was left was the bitter, crushing knowledge that I had never mattered to them. I had lost everything I had worked for, and they were acting like it meant nothing. I spent the next few days desperately trying to come up with a plan. College was still an option, but without my savings, I didn't know how I was going to afford it. I spent hours looking up scholarships, loans, anything that could help me rebuild. I refused to believe that Ashley's selfishness could actually take away my future. But then one night, everything changed. I was walking past the living room when I heard my mother talking. At first, I wasn't paying attention, but something in her tone made me stop. She was speaking quietly, urgently, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. And she was talking about me. I froze. She wasn't just dismissing me. She wasn't just brushing off what had happened. She was planning something. She described me like I was some kind of problem that needed to be dealt with. She called me ungrateful, said I was out of control, that I had become impossible to handle. I barely recognized the person she was describing. It wasn't me. It wasn't even close. Then I heard the words that made my stomach drop. Military school. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. But the longer I listened, the more the pieces started to fall into place. She had already started the process. She had reached out, asked about deadlines, inquired about financial assistance. She had already painted me as the villain, the troubled son who needed to be sent away for his own good. I stood there, silent, the truth settling over me like a suffocating weight. She wasn't just taking Ashley's side. She was getting rid of me. I turned and walked away before I could hear the rest of the conversation. I didn't need to. I had heard enough. The betrayal settled in my chest like ice. She had already stolen my future once when she let Ashley take my savings. Now, she was going to do it again. I knew how my mother worked. She had already framed me as the villain in this story. In her version of events, I was the ungrateful son, the angry problem child who refused to get along with his family. She would tell everyone that she had no choice but to send me away, that it was for my own good. And Ashley? She would sit back and let it happen, completely unconcerned with the fact that she had been the one to destroy everything in the first place. The realization hit me with an icy clarity. I was being erased. I stayed up all night thinking about it, my mind spinning with the weight of what I had just learned. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It wasn't just unfair treatment. This was control. She was making sure I had no chance to escape on my own terms. She wasn't going to let me leave, wasn't going to let me find my own way. She had decided that I wasn't worth keeping around. And now, she was going to make sure I was gone. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what I was up against. And for the first time, I knew that if I wanted to survive this, if I wanted to win, I would have to do something I had never done before. I would have to fight back. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let Ashley win. They had already taken everything from me. Now it was my turn to take something back. The night I discovered my mother's plan, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with every possible way to stop what was coming. My entire life, I had been taught one thing. Ashley was the priority, and I was just an afterthought. But this was different. This wasn't just another moment of unfairness, another instance of my mother brushing me aside. This was deliberate, calculated. She wasn't just siding with Ashley. She was actively removing me from the equation. The realization settled in my stomach like a sickness I couldn't shake. This wasn't about discipline. This wasn't about sending me somewhere to straighten me out. This was about making sure I didn't have a choice anymore. She knew I was planning to leave for college, knew I was trying to find a way to salvage what Ashley had destroyed. And she couldn't allow that. Because if I succeeded, if I made it out on my own, it would prove that I had never needed her or Ashley to begin with. She couldn't stand the thought of that, so she was taking the choice away from me. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought. I need to act now. If my mother was already in contact with a military school, if she had already started filling out forms and having conversations, that meant I had a small window of time before everything was finalized. The moment my enrollment was confirmed, I would be powerless. They would take me, force me into a system where I had no control. My mother wasn't just trying to get rid of me. She was trying to erase any possibility of escape. I needed proof. If I could get concrete evidence of what she was planning, if I could find something official, emails, documents, anything, I could use it. Maybe I could talk to a teacher at school, get help. Maybe I could contact my college and explain what was happening. If nothing else, I needed to know exactly how much time I had left. I waited until my mother left the house that afternoon, then went straight to her room. She wasn't careful with her passwords. She had used the same ones for years, and I had memorized them long ago, not out of curiosity, but because I had always known deep down that one day I would need to protect myself. I opened her laptop, my hands shaking as I navigated to her email. The moment I saw her inbox, my worst fears were confirmed. She had already submitted the application. The email thread was long, back-and-forth messages between her and an admissions officer at the military school. She had given them everything, my school records, my personal information, even notes about my behavioral issues. She had painted me as troubled, as if I were some rebellious delinquent who needed to be sent away for my own good. She had lied. She had made me into something I wasn't, twisting reality until I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. I kept reading, my pulse pounding in my ears. One email, dated just 2 days ago, stood out. The admissions officer had thanked my mother for her quick response and assured her that everything was moving forward smoothly. There was only one step left. They just needed my signature. I exhaled sharply, a wave of both relief and panic crashing over me. That meant she hadn't fully locked me in yet. She couldn't just force my enrollment without my signature. She would have to get me to sign something, even if it meant lying to me about what it was. I had time. Not much, but enough. I quickly took pictures of the emails, sending them to myself as proof. Then, I erased any trace of my activity and shut the laptop. For the first time since this all started, I felt like I had an advantage. But I also realized something else. My mother wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted. She had already committed to this. In her mind, I was gone. She had made up her version of events, convinced herself that this was the right thing to do. That meant she wasn't going to ask me to sign the papers. She was going to force me to sign them. That night, I acted like everything was normal. I ate dinner in silence, ignored Ashley's smug glances, avoided looking at my mother for too long. But inside, my mind was racing. I had two options. I could try to run, but I had nowhere to go. No money, no real connections outside of school. If I disappeared, I would be making it even easier for her to claim I was unstable, to justify sending me away. Or I could fight back from within. If I wanted to win this, I needed to play the game better than she was. I needed to let her believe that I didn't know what she was planning. If she thought I was unaware, she wouldn't rush me. She would try to manipulate me into signing the forms, and that gave me a chance to flip things in my favor. The next day, I went to school like nothing was wrong. But instead of going to my first class, I went straight to the guidance counselor's office. I had never asked for help before, never trusted that any adult in my life would take my side. But I didn't have a choice anymore. I showed the counselor the emails. I told her everything. How Ashley had stolen my money, how my mother had covered for her, how she was trying to send me away to military school under false pretenses. I expected skepticism, doubt, the same dismissiveness I had always received from the people around me. But instead, she listened. And for the first time in my life, I saw someone actually believe me. She told me she was going to call my college, to let them know what was happening. She also said she would talk to the principal, to see if there was anything the school could do to intervene. She didn't promise me a miracle, but she promised me a chance. That was all I needed. I walked out of that office with my head held high, knowing that for once, I had the upper hand. My mother thought she had complete control over me, but she had underestimated something important. I wasn't a scared little kid anymore. I wasn't going to let her decide my fate. She had already taken everything from me once. I would never let her do it again. For the first time in my life, I had leverage. The moment I left the guidance counselor's office, I felt something shift inside me, a realization that I didn't have to be powerless. My mother had spent years making me feel like I had no control, no voice, no way to fight back. But now, I had proof of what she was trying to do. I had someone outside of this house who knew the truth. That changed everything. I walked through the halls of my school with my head high, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. My mother thought she had me backed into a corner, but she had underestimated me. She had thought I would just accept it, that I wouldn't fight, that I would let her strip me of my future the same way she had let Ashley steal everything I had worked for. She was wrong. By the time I got home that afternoon, I had already decided that I wasn't going to confront her immediately. I wasn't going to let her know that I knew. Not yet. If I gave away my position too soon, she would find another way to manipulate the situation, to regain control before I could stop her. Instead, I waited. The rest of the day, I pretended that nothing had changed. I went through the motions, answering in short responses whenever she spoke to me, ignoring Ashley's smug glances from across the dinner table. But inside, my mind was moving fast, thinking through every possible scenario. Then, just as I had predicted, it happened. After dinner, my mother asked me to sit down. Her voice was calm, too calm. That fake practice patience she always used when she was about to force something on me and wanted to make it seem like my choice. I already knew what was coming. She placed a stack of papers in front of me, neatly arranged, the pen already waiting on top. I didn't need to read them to know what they were. This was her final move. She had dressed it up as something reasonable, something logical. She told me that this was the best thing for me, that I needed direction, discipline, an opportunity to become a better version of myself. She spoke as if this decision had already been made, as if I should be grateful for what she was doing. I didn't react. I didn't even look at the papers. I just listened. She didn't mention Ashley. Not once. Not the money she had stolen. Not the way she had burned my future to the ground. Because in my mother's mind, that didn't matter. What mattered was that I had dared to push back, to stand up for myself, to question the role she had assigned me. And now, she was fixing that. I could see it in her eyes, the expectation that I would give in, that I would sign without question, that I would prove her right. She thought I was already defeated. She thought she had won. I leaned forward, picked up the papers, and slowly flipped through them, pretending to consider them. The silence stretched between us. Then I spoke. I told her no. For the first time in my life, I told her no, with absolute finality. No hesitation, no fear, no room for negotiation. She blinked at me, momentarily caught off guard, as if it had never even occurred to her that I might refuse. And then the mask slipped. Her voice sharpened, her posture stiffened, and the fake patience vanished. She told me that this wasn't a choice, that she had already made the arrangements, that there was nothing I could do to change it. Her voice rose with every word, frustration turning to anger as she realized I wasn't falling into line. I let her go on, let her talk herself into a corner. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and showed her the photos I had taken of the emails between her and the military school. Her face drained of color. She stared at the screen like it had betrayed her, like the proof of what she had done shouldn't exist. She started to say something, an excuse, a lie, a justification, but I didn't give her the chance. I told her that I had already spoken to my guidance counselor, that they knew what she was trying to do, that my college had already been contacted, that people outside of this house were now aware of what was happening. For the first time, she looked trapped. The power she had held over me for years was slipping from her grasp, and she knew it. Ashley walked into the room then, sensing the tension. She glanced between us, confusion flickering across her face. But when she saw the expression on my mother's face, something shifted in her posture. It was the first time I had ever seen doubt in her. Like maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to realize that things weren't going according to plan. I turned back to my mother, meeting her eyes with something she had never seen from me before, certainty. I told her that I was leaving for college, that I wasn't signing anything, that I wasn't going anywhere except the future I had built for myself. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I told her that if she pushed this any further, if she tried to force me, if she attempted to make my life more difficult than it already was, I would destroy her. Not physically, not in anger, but with the truth. I would go to my teachers, my school, anyone who would listen. I would tell them everything she had done, every way she had tried to manipulate me, every lie she had told to try and send me away. I would make sure that every single person in her life knew exactly what kind of mother she was. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ashley looked uncomfortable for the first time in her life. My mother looked like she wanted to scream, like she wanted to throw something, to claw back the control she had just lost. But she couldn't, because I had played the game better than she had, because she knew that I wasn't bluffing, because for the first time, I was the one in control. She pushed away from the table abruptly, standing up, shaking her head, muttering something under her breath about how ungrateful I was. She stormed off, slamming the door behind her. Ashley hesitated for a moment, like she wanted to say something. Maybe she thought she could smooth it over, pretend things weren't falling apart. But when she saw the way I was looking at her, she must have realized the truth. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. She left without a word. I sat there alone for a long time, staring at the unsigned papers still sitting on the table. For years, I had felt powerless in this house, like I was just waiting for the day I could finally escape. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I had won, and there was nothing they could do to stop me now. For years, I had dreamed of the day I would finally leave this house behind. I had imagined what it would feel like to walk away, to break free, to start over in a place where I wasn't treated like a burden. I thought it would be a slow process, something I would plan and execute carefully. But in the end, it all unraveled faster than I expected. After my mother stormed off, after Ashley left the room in stunned silence, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the unsigned papers. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, from the weight of what had just happened. I had won. For the first time in my life, I had backed my mother into a corner, forced her to face the fact that she couldn't control me anymore. But something in my gut told me that this wasn't over. She wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. She would find another way to reassert her power. I needed to be ready. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt louder. Every creak of the floorboards made my pulse spike. I expected her to retaliate, to come into my room, to try and intimidate me, to demand that I sign the papers. But she never did. Instead, she went silent. And that was even worse. For the next few days, she barely spoke to me. She acted as if I didn't exist, which would have felt like a victory if I didn't know her so well. This wasn't surrender. This was strategy. She was waiting, calculating, plotting her next move. Then the plot twist came. I got a call from my guidance counselor. She had spoken to my college, explained my situation, told them that my mother was trying to send me away against my will. I had expected them to offer some words of sympathy, maybe some advice, but what they said next completely blindsided me. My tuition had been covered. At first, I didn't understand. I had no money. Ashley had stolen everything I had saved. But then, the counselor explained, my college had access to emergency financial aid programs for students in unstable family situations. They had reviewed my case and approved a full scholarship for my first year. I didn't just have a way out. I had a guaranteed future. For so long, I had thought that my mother and Ashley had completely destroyed my chances at escaping. But in the end, their actions had done the opposite. They had forced me to reach out for help, and in doing so, I had found a support system I never knew existed. And now, I was leaving sooner than expected. I didn't tell my mother right away. I wanted to see if she would make another move first. And sure enough, she did. Late one evening, she knocked on my door for the first time in days. Her voice was sweet, too sweet, that fake warmth she always used when she was trying to manipulate me. She told me that she had been thinking things over, and that she didn't want to force me to go to military school. She said she had realized that maybe she had overreacted, and that if I was willing to sign just a few compromise forms, we could find another solution together. I already knew what she was doing. She was trying to trick me. If she couldn't get me to sign the original papers, she would get me to sign something else, something that looked less threatening, something that still gave her the legal power to send me away. I pretended to hesitate, pretended to consider it, let her think she was getting through to me. Then I told her I needed a few days to think it over. She smiled, acting like we had reached some sort of middle ground. But I knew the truth. She was still trying to get rid of me, and I wasn't going to let her. The next morning, I packed my bags. I didn't tell her I was leaving. I didn't tell Ashley either. They had both spent years making me feel like I was nothing, like I had no power, no control, no worth. They didn't deserve a goodbye. I left while they were out, taking only what I needed. I had already arranged housing through my college, a dorm, a fresh start, a future that was mine and mine alone. It was over. For years, I had been waiting for my mother's approval, waiting for Ashley to finally see me as something more than a backup plan. But standing outside that house for the last time, I felt something I had never expected. Relief. I didn't need them. And without me, they had nothing to control anymore. In the weeks that followed, I ignored their attempts to contact me. My mother sent a few emails, most of them playing the victim, pretending that she had just been trying to do what was best for me. Ashley didn't reach out at all. I figured she was too busy burning through whatever scraps of money she had left. Then, one day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a former family friend, someone who had been close to my mother for years. The message was short, almost hesitant, like they weren't sure if they should even be telling me. Ashley had gotten arrested. I read the words over and over, barely able to process them. She had been caught writing fraudulent checks, desperately trying to cover some kind of debt. Apparently, without me there to bail her out, things had finally caught up to her. And my mother? She had lost everything trying to fix Ashley's mistakes. For years, she had chosen her over me. And now, she was stuck with the consequences. I stared at the message for a long time before finally turning off my phone. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for my mother to take something from me. I wasn't waiting for Ashley to ruin something I had built. I was finally gone, and they had nothing left of me to take.